It's a beautiful day at Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. Good morning. I'm Abhi Janamanchi, one of your ministers. My pronouns are he and him.
I am Michael Thorne. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the worship associate today. On behalf of the entire congregation, we welcome you to our worship service this morning.
Our words of welcome are filled with our deepest aspirations and call us all to embody beloved community as we say together, you are welcome here.
Whether you are joining us for the first time or you've been a member since our founding in 1951,
you are welcome here.
Whoever you are and whomever you love,
you are welcome here.
Whatever your gender identity and expression, beliefs, or immigration status,
you are welcome here.
However you arrived at this beloved place in person or online,
you are welcome here. If you're joining us for the first time today, and if you feel comfortable doing so, please raise your hand so that we may recognize and welcome you, as well as our ushers and greeters are able to offer you a gift to welcome you to our service this morning. Included in your gift is a brochure about Cedar Lane that also contains a page that if you would like to fill out and share your information with us, we would appreciate it. Let us join together in giving our guests a warm Cedar Lane welcome.
I would like to draw your attention to the announcements page for the wonderful things happening here today. Here are a couple of highlights.
Our generosity team is committed to putting the fun back into fundraising. And, well, if that's how you feel, let me give you another one. And through our co-chair, Mary Means, provide you with the means to do your part. So, we encourage you to pick up your annual pledge card at their table after the service, which is in the lounge. And if you turn it in today, you will get a coupon that is good for a free healthy donut and bagel at the youth group's table. It is shared ministry in action, folks. So please get your pledge card and a donut dollar or bagel buck today. Also, this coming Wednesday at 7 p.m. in the chapel, our intern minister, Dana Edwards, will be leading a special Vespers to usher in the Lenten season and an opportunity for families to gather. So it's a family-oriented gathering to come together to center ourselves and be intentional about what it is that we let go and let in. Thank you, Dana, for offering this ministry to us. And I'm back. It was wonderful to be in Japan. Oh, thank you. It was so good. Haven't been back in 12 years, and it was like going back home. Japan is my second spiritual home. And to be in that place among friends and accompanying our UUA president and her family, Susan Frederick Gray, as she was meeting and getting to know some of our Japanese religious partners with the Rishoku Sekai, the lay Buddhist organization, and the Tsubaki Grand Shrine, one of the oldest Shinto shrines in Japan, and also other groups that are members of the International Association for Religious Freedom, the IARF, was truly a blessing. And I am delighted, one of the things I met as part of my visit was spend time with members of the Suginami Dharma Center in Tokyo. Suginami in Japanese means Cedar Lane. Yep. And I'll share this in a newsletter, in our e-news. it was amazing. It was like I was back at Cedar Lane. They have an all-purpose room like this one, and they have chairs that look very much like our chairs. And after the meeting that we had, members all joined in, started stacking chairs. So I felt totally at home. So the minister and I connected about possibly partnering with both our congregations, and part of that, exploring the possibility of a trip to Japan and also a reciprocal visit from them. So stay tuned for more details. Anyway, that was a longer intro than I intended. But while I was gone, I heard that things went swimmingly well. And what an amazing job our staff and members did last Sunday of really pulling off a miracle in making sure that this place, the kitchen, and all the flooding that happened was quickly taken care of so we could have worship. So thank you, all of you who stepped up, stepped in, waded in, and made church happen. Deep gratitude. Thank you. Come on, let's give them a big hand. And I'm going to be away again tomorrow. Yes, but no flooding, please. This time I'll be traveling to Los Angeles for the annual meeting of the senior ministers of large UU congregations, SMOLC, as we are called, for our annual retreat and meeting, which incidentally, SMOLC was formed by Reverend Ken McLean, our minister emeritus, and this is our 40th year. So we're gathering especially to honor both Ken and the history of this organization, and also the ways in which it continues to support and nurture ministers who serve some of our large congregations. So I look forward to being there, but I will be back the following week, and then you're stuck with me. With that, our pastoral visitor.
Our pastoral visitor today is Tim Persons. He will be available during and after the service to support you if you have a joy or sorrow on your heart.
Thank you, Tim. And now let us take a moment and turn and greet our neighbors, especially our newcomers. Was it too long?
Yes, and it all needed to be said.
Yeah, I didn't know what I could cut, potentially. See?
You said all the things. It was good.
Good morning. Good morning. Gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle.
If I were a rich man, diddle-deedle-diddle-digga-digga-deedle-diddle-dum, all day long I'd biddy-biddy-bum. If I were a wealthy man, wouldn't have to work hard, diddle-deedle-diddle-digga-digga-deedle-diddle-dum. If I were a biddy-biddy rich, digga-digga-deedle-diddle man, I'd build a big tall house with rooms by the dozen right in the middle of the town, a fine tin roof with real wooden floors below. There would be one long staircase just going up, and one even longer coming down, and one more leading nowhere just for show. I'd fill my yard with chicks and turkeys and geese and ducks for the town and all to see and hear, squawking just as noisily as they can. And each loud quack and cluck and gobble and honk will land like a trumpet on the ear, as if to say, here lives a wealthy man. If I were a rich man, diddle-diddle, diddle-digga-digga-diddle-diddle-dum, all day long I'd biddy-biddy-bum. If I were a wealthy man, wouldn't have to work hard, diddle-diddle-diddle, digga-digga-digga-diddle-dum. If I were a biddy-biddy rich, digga-digga-diddle-diddle man. I see my wife, my Goldie, looking like a rich man's wife with a proper double chin, supervising meals to her heart's delight. I see her putting on airs and strutting like a peacock. Boy, what a happy mood she's in. Screaming at the servants day and night. The most important men in town will come to fawn on me. They will ask me to advise them, like a Solomon the wise. If you please, Rev Tevye, pardon me, Rev Tevye, posing problems that would cross a rabbi's eyes. Boy, 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 boy. And it won't make one bit of difference if I answer right or wrong. When you're rich, they really think you know. If I were rich, I'd have the time that I lack to sit in the synagogue and pray, and maybe have a seat by the eastern wall. And I'd discuss the holy books with the learned men 7 hours every day. This would be the sweetest thing of all. If I were a rich man, diddle-diddle-diddle-digga-digga-diddle-diddle-dum, all day long I'd biddy-biddy-bum. If I were a wealthy man, wouldn't have to work hard, diddle-diddle-digga-digga-digga-diddle-diddle-dum. Lord, who made the lion and the lamb, you decreed I should be what I am. Would it spoil some vast eternal plan if I were a wealthy man?
That was awesome. Thank you so much. We gather with gratitude for the many gifts of this community.
The opportunity to be affirmed for who we are and to offer that affirmation to others.
Regular reminders that we must see our world through the lens of love.
The chance to rise together to help remake the world in the ideal of justice.
And the aspiration to consider that all life is precious.
So this morning, let's welcome all of these gifts with gratitude.
For they have been paid for with many currencies.
the blood of martyrs who died so that we can be free in our religion,
the sweat of those who persisted in justice's name against hostility and adversity,
the laughter and joy of those giddy with the embrace of community,
the infinite small acts of service that make the parts greater than the whole.
So today we consider with gratitude and humility what it means to pay forward what has been paid forward to us.
And now, with all of this, we worship with gladness in our hearts.
As Melissa Ferguson kindles the chalice, symbol of our faith and our gathered community, please rise in body and or in spirit to share in unison the chalice lighting words on screen. We kindle the chalice as a symbol of the wondrous gift of free religious community. May we renew our faith in the goodness and beauty of life. May we affirm the way of the open mind and generous heart. May it rekindle the flame of memory and hope. May we claim the vision of an earth made fair and with all her people one.
Please be seated.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Rebecca Lawrence, and I'm happy to be speaking before you all today. I'll admit that when Reverend Katie and Reverend Abhi approached me to ask me if I'd be interested in offering the affirmation this morning, I was more than a little nervous. But then I started thinking about the events of last Sunday, namely the flood that spread throughout this building, and with that, the efforts of our staff and volunteers to clean up this holy space enough to hold Sunday services, even with so much work left to do. And that image brought me to this month's theme of resilience. Resilience is defined as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. And I think that can certainly be seen in the response to this flood. However, in my view, the work of this church cannot be defined solely by its resilience, but also by its perseverance, or the persistence in doing something despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. In these times when our values of justice and equity seem constantly imperiled, I return to this congregation's spirit of perseverance. When the building floods, we persevere. When, in the choir, Henry gifts us with a particularly difficult piece of music, we persevere. And when we resolve to love with a mightiness that knows no bounds, we persevere. This perseverance is rooted in our resilience. In hard times, it's imperative to keep moving forward, no matter how difficult the circumstances. Being a member of this church has shown me that perseverance exists in the largest and smallest moments, and resilience calls us to act in those moments. However difficult the road ahead may be, I truly believe that we move towards a more equitable and just future together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please rise in body or in spirit to sing For All That Is Our Life. The words are on the screen.
Christ
Good morning. We gather each week not for our needs alone, but to bear witness to our joys and triumphs, our sorrows and disappointments. We come together as companions on this life's journey. In this circle of caring, our hearts are with those whose primary spiritual practice is parenting. And we hold in our hearts those who are mourning a loss, those with grief and chronic pain, with illnesses seen and unseen, and with mental illness and addiction. Within our Cedar Lane community, we are proud of Ben Plager, son of Travis Plager and Melissa Reichley, who testified in Annapolis on Wednesday in support of more physical education time for elementary school students. We offer our gratitude for Sarah Davidson for her 8.5 years of growth and administrative ministry at Cedar Lane. She will be deeply missed here. The good news is that she'll have a new job that is closer to home for her. Sarah's last day will be March 13th, and we'll be honoring her at the March 1st worship service, so please join us. Our caring extends beyond the Cedar Lane community to all whose lives are impacted by loss and calamities and violence in our world. We hold in our hearts the people of China, Japan, and South Korea, and the other countries that have been affected by the coronavirus outbreak that has taken the lives of more than 2,000 people and infected more than 70,000 globally. We hold in our hearts the 9 people of Hanau, Germany, who were the victims of a violent hate crime. May their families find peace and strength in their communities. Now I invite you to breathe into the silence. To center yourself for a moment. And I invite those who are grieving a loss or commemorating the anniversary of a loss to rise in body and or spirit. As you feel moved, you may speak the name of your loved one into the silence. Please remain seated as we sing Spirit of Life.
Each Sunday, we give and receive an offering to sustain the mission and ministry of Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. And twice a month, we share our offering to support an organization that is outside of Cedar Lane, that is in alignment with our values and our convictions, and also provides ways in which we can be engaged to put our values into action. Today's Share the Plate offering will support Unitarian Universalists for Social Justice in the National Capital Region, UUSJ. And to speak more about the work of UUSJ and how we can be engaged in one of their important endeavors, I'd like to welcome Pablo de Jesus, who is the Executive Director of UUSJ. Welcome, Pablo.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'll just get straight to the point. You guys are a founding member of UUSJ. We consider ourselves a partner with you in trying to make sure that you have many opportunities to live your UU values with regard to social justice, especially as focused on federal policy, rallies in downtown DC that express our commitment as UUs to a more just United States. We cover 4 issues: economic justice, immigration justice, environment and climate justice, and defending our democracy. Cedar Lane is a powerhouse for your tagline, where love works. Your green team participates with us on many things. Your sanctuary team participates with us. You have plenty of UU leaders who are involved with UUSJ. John Gubbings is your board member with UUSJ. Diane and Reverend Charlene on the immigration, the sanctuary team have been involved with UUSJ. Your Molly Hollick and your green teams have been involved with UUSJ. You guys are part of us, and we are part of you. And fundamentally, what we're trying to do is build an advocacy movement for UUs, one that engages the injustices that we see systemically in the United States and allows us as UUs an opportunity to live those values. So Reverend Abhi asked me to give you some specifics about how we can do that work together. So I'm going to name a couple of things that I think are important for you as a community that's working in love for love. During March, we have a letter writing opportunity that's focused on temporary protected status. So I encourage you to talk with John Gubbings and next Sunday do some tabling around writing letters to your senators on the issue of TPS so that folks in our community that are being deported or being threatened with deportation can be protected. Conceptually, that's tied to your sanctuary work. Later in March, the National Sanctuary Network will probably be coming to Washington, D.C. to specifically talk about sanctuary issues. There are 5 Unitarian churches throughout the United States that are providing sanctuary. And you guys are located here, and you guys are the gold standard in this region for doing that kind of work. You should be really proud of yourself for that. And so I encourage you to start planning towards having Cedar Lane present for whatever they're going to end up doing on Capitol Hill, because our voices are important in trying to champion the issues of sanctuary legislatively and politically on Capitol Hill. In April and May, we will be focused on a national letter writing campaign that's geared towards green issues. We're still working with MFE, Ministry for Earth, on what the exact topic is going to be, but I expect that with the wonderful work that you guys do at the congregational level here on green issues, that Cedar Lane will be present and accounted for in that. And then finally, in June, very specifically, following on Reverend Abhi's leadership and participation with the Poor People's Campaign, there's going to be a major mobilization in downtown DC that's going to kick off many months of voter mobilization around the issues of the poor and the intersectional way in which things in our system work. And so I invite Cedar Lane to have a strong showing at that event. Plan towards it, go down in groups, perhaps even get a bus and come down on Saturday the 20th. Finally, to sort of bring all of this together, UUSJ, in partnership with the UUA and with the REAP Voting Rights Project, have pulled our shekels together, shekels, if I were a rich man, and we're hiring an organizer to help congregations like Cedar Lane get engaged. Because for the past several cycles of elections, you guys have told us, well, we don't really want to be doing voter mobilization in Maryland so much. What we want to do is either go to Virginia or go to Pennsylvania, maybe even West Virginia. And some of you want to go as far as North Carolina. So we heard that input, and we pulled our shekels together and some deep thinkers around those issues. And now we're going to be hiring an organizer to help you and other UUs in this region engage in Pennsylvania, downstate in Virginia, and North Carolina, and we'll do some remote work into Georgia. So these are all ways that you guys can get involved. Conceptually, I want to underscore for your lay leaders, now is the time to be thinking about how each one of your justice ministries can get involved in mobilizing voters. So whether it's the chorus going out and singing while people are doing voter mobilization, or it's the green team going out and finding out where the communities of marginalized folks who are being affected by environmental injustice, how are you mobilizing those voters? Or whether it's the folks who care about immigration justice and sanctuary issues, how is Cedar Lane connecting to those networks and getting its energy and efforts behind that work? Because the transformative opportunity this election, if we want to make a difference for Rosa, if we want to make a difference for the environment, is in, at the very least, having the majority of Americans possible participating in the election. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Pablo, for that call to action. And friends, I hope we will be engaged proactively in this election cycle. And we have many opportunities, which actually Dana is going to be our point person for the UU the Vote campaign, and also for the Poor People's campaign. She's been chosen among many candidates to be one of the student mobilizers for the Poor People's campaign. So look forward to receiving more information, and if you're already interested, please see Dana after the service. Our offering will now be given and gratefully received.
In the words of the Reverend Lynn Unger, through the work of our hands and the work of our lives, our love is made real. May we be grateful that all we bring and share to make love real at Cedar Lane.
Then said a rich man to the prophet, "Speak to us of giving." And he answered, "You give but little when you give of your possessions. It is when you give of yourself that you really give. For what are your possessions but things you keep and guard for fear you may need them tomorrow? And what is fear of need but need itself? There are those who give little of the much which they have, and they give it for recognition, and their hidden desire makes their gifts unwholesome. And there are those who have little and give it all. These are the believers in life and the bounty of life, and their coffer is never empty. There are those who give with joy, and that joy is their reward. And there are those who give with pain, and that pain is their baptism. And there are those who give and know not pain in giving, nor do they seek joy, nor give with mindfulness of virtue. They give, as in yonder valley the myrtle breathes its fragrance into space. It is well to give when asked, but it is better to give unasked through understanding. And to the open-handed, the search for one who shall receive is joy greater than giving. All you have shall one day be given. Therefore, give now, that the season of giving may be yours and not your inheritors. Thus concludes the reading for this morning.
Come, let your voice be strong. Come, hear the Spirit's song. Come, sound of joy beyond.
Come, let us sing, sing.
Come, let your voice be heard.
Sing.
Take flight on wings of a bird.
Sing.
With joy in every word.
Sing.
Come, let us sing.
Oh, sing.
Come, let your voice be strong. Come, hear the Spirit's song. And sound of joy beyond.
Come, let us sing, sing.
Come, let your voice be heard. Take flight on wings of a bird. With joy in every word.
Sing.
Come, let us sing.
Oh, sing.
Many times I had wondered as a child when music plays, why does it set me free? Now that I've grown, I finally realize that music is freedom and they're both in me. Oh, come let your voice be strong, come hear the Spirit's song, and sound the joy beyond.
Come, let us sing.
Come let your voice be heard, take back the wings of others, joy in every word. Come let us sing.
Thank you, members of the choir, Jasmine and Henry, for that wonderful, wonderful prelude that you shared with us this morning. Thank you for your amazing music ministry. And we release you into the day. And thank you, Rebecca, for that wonderful affirmation that you shared, lifting up. Come on, do it. Lifting up the importance of resilience and how we at Cedar Lane practice resilience, sometimes whether we want to or not. Thank you. Thank you. So, one of the blessings that I have come to appreciate about being a Unitarian Universalist is how we as a religion sometimes like to go places where we sometimes don't want to go. In that sense, that we lift up and engage with topics and themes that are not easy and that sometimes create discomfort within us and as a community as well. But that is, to me, what it means to be a free religious faith, because we have the freedom. And that freedom is accorded to us who are ministers through the freedom of the pulpit, where we are charged not only to comfort the afflicted, but also at times afflict the comfortable, and still come back to work and receive a paycheck. So today is one of those moments, all this prologue, to just say that I am engaging in a reflection that has taken me more than 7 years to do at Cedar Lane. Partly because, while there are so many wonderful topics that we have total freedom to explore, and people actually enjoy that and look forward to that. For example, when ministers preach on sex in UU congregations, they love it. It's just, woo, it's top of the list. When we preach about religion, okay, in small doses. Politics sometimes gets a little dangerous. But one subject which is almost taboo, money. So, my friends, today I get to do that, and I hope you will still let me come back to work after this, that I can actually come to Cedar Lane after my trip from California. But also, it is one of those reflections where, I get normally accused of this, that I throw in everything but the kitchen sink. But today, literally, it is everything but the kitchen sink. So it's going to take us a little longer than the usual. So just sit back, relax, and get uncomfortable. I tend to worry a lot about money, probably more than I ought to. Meditation teachers teach us that in order to be effective in contemplative practice, one must learn to tame the monkey mind. Figure out how to control and regulate the babbling thoughts and images that arise, that flit across our field of consciousness when we sit down to meditate. In my case, when it comes to my own mind, I think all the monkeys are accountants and IRS agents. No fear is greater for many of us than the fear of not having enough money, writes the philosopher Jacob Needleman. I can really relate to that. Now, I often remind myself, of course, how groundless that fear is and how poorly it is justified by the realities of my own daily existence. Yet, money still worries me. And because I don't like for fretful thoughts to constantly intrude upon my more enlightened and illumined ruminations that I then bring to all of you to illuminate you, I've tried over the years to understand their source and meaning. Now, one reason why money has been such an issue for me as an adult is that it was hard to come by when I was growing up in India. See, I was raised in a single-income household by my mother. And my mother worked really hard to make ends meet, but it was a daily struggle. And then she went through periods of time when she was without a job, which made it harder. That sometimes she had to dip into her meager savings or pawn her jewelry a few times in order to put food on the table or pay for my school. Now, while I could not characterize ourselves as being poor, we did skirt the edge a few times. And my mother never liked to discuss money. That was not a subject that we talked about. And my grandfather, bless his heart, lived and embodied a value that life is not about money or making a living, but about making a life. And he drilled that into me at an early age that I really bought into it, which is why I was not interested in becoming an IT professional and making tons of money coming to the U.S. and instead chose this blessed vocation instead. So for me, the great god Mammon has always been somewhat of a mystery, and therefore became somewhat of a preoccupation as an adult. Now, while this early informational vacuum may shed some light on my own life situation, it does fail to explain why so many people in our culture seem similarly afflicted by money or concern about money. As Lynn Twist writes in The Soul of Money, Transforming Your Relationship with Money and Life, and I quote, "Everyone is interested in money, and most of us feel a chronic concern or even fear that we will never really have enough or be able to keep enough of it. Many of us pretend that money isn't important to us or think it shouldn't be. And many of us live openly with the accumulation of money as our primary goal. No matter how much money we have or don't have, the worry that we don't or won't have enough of it quickens our heart around money issues." If I may be so bold, I think this pretty much about captures everyone who is here today in this sanctuary. If you're not, just raise your hand and we'll applaud you. But to understand money's power over our thoughts and our lives, we need to look beyond the anecdotal. So let us begin by asking a basic question, a simple question. What is money? To this, there is a very simple answer. The words money, memory, and mental all come from the same Indo-European root mens, which means to use one's mind or to think. Money, then, is a cognitive system, a means for measuring and remembering value. So there's nothing real about money. It is merely a mental device for comparing dissimilar things and establishing their relative worth. With the passage of time, however, this symbolic system has become more potent and for many of us more important than the goods and services whose value it replaces. We used to think that money had only instrumental utility. It was good only insofar as it could be used to improve the conditions of our lives, individual and collective. But for quite some time now, money is important in and of itself. It connotes power and confers prestige. In a materialistic, demythologized society, it has become the primary source of grace, even salvation. And for many people, a sense of well-being and high net worth go hand in hand. Money is then more than just a tool. It serves as a symbolic repository for a great many of our hopes, fears, dreams, nightmares, visions, and ambitions. It has not just instrumental, but intrinsic value. Now, in my early years, when I was more naive and idealistic, I would imagine that people who built huge fortunes would eventually use all that wealth to achieve some higher purpose by giving it all away, to build the common good, to create justice and equity in the world, and to create an enduring and honorable legacy. But that doesn't seem to be the case, I found. In fact, most studies of charitable giving indicate that as personal income increases, generosity wanes. As a rule, people of modest means are considerably more generous than the wealthy. So what really are most people after when they pursue and sometimes try to hoard money? Security, comfort, pleasure, or only partial explanations? The real answer, I submit, is control. Money may not be able to purchase fulfillment, but it does help us feel that we are somehow in charge of our lives, our destiny. The more money we have, the more of life's variables we think we can manipulate. The more of life's vicissitudes we think we can escape. The more of life's demands we think we can somehow successfully negotiate. So money is both a symbol and an agent of control. So I submit that it isn't greed, but the need for control that sometimes keeps us lusting after the almighty dollar. And unfortunately, this is a kind of addictive behavior that our society not only wholeheartedly endorses, but celebrates and praises, the current occupant being a good example. Now, everything that I've said so far has to do with the downside of this money business, but friends, there is an upside. There are, after all, two sides to every coin. Oh, come on. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm not here this morning to demonize money or to recommend holy poverty to the entire congregation, because I'm not a big believer in austerity. You know, I enjoy drawing a good salary. I enjoy my creature comforts. Look at me. This new Frank Lloyd Wright tie, I love it. I do enjoy it. And I sincerely believe that money is not evil, that wealth is not evil, even if Bernie Sanders says that, or trying to accumulate wealth is not evil by itself. And I do not believe that money is not, either in fact or as a figure of speech, a four-letter word. So, eschewing money is not the solution to the problems I've mentioned, but what we need to do, I think, is to reconsider the purpose of money and to transform our relationship to it accordingly. So the question is, how do we use our money? Apply it more as a spiritual practice. Because when money becomes a spiritual rather than a secular tool, we begin to use it for discernment around our values and how we live our lives and our values. We can make, accumulate, or spend money reflexively out of those old unconscious needs for control, or we can begin to use money as a means for getting in touch with a self that may be a bit hard to look at sometimes, a fragile, fearful, defensive, insecure self that would like to be less anxious and more generous. but doesn't quite know how to go about it. As Robert Sardello insists, the point of money is to make soul, not more money. And a religious community like this one, Cedar Lane, is a good place to be doing that work together. Now, being part of a religious community, like being part of a healthy marriage or relationship, demands a special set of attitudes and expectations on the part of the participants. So if we approach a relationship with a mentality of what's in it for me, we are almost certainly setting ourselves up for disappointment and failure. Similarly, if a congregation approaches its members and trying to meet their needs as a service provider, kind of buying into our consumer culture to try and meet every need, the congregation is definitely setting itself up for disappointment and failure. But if our connection to our faith community is to grow into something more rewarding, more sustaining, we have to give up the consumer mindset and begin to think of ourselves indeed as stakeholders, investors, co-owners in what happens in our faith community. Just as the parties in a relationship see themselves more as partners rather than competitors with a joint share in the success of the enterprise. Making that transition from consumer to co-owner involves an emotional shift, but also a financial one. At that point, what people pledge to support their religious community is likely to increase significantly, but the profit, the payback, the dividends also rise dramatically. Now, many TV game shows love to promise instant wealth as the key to happiness. Now, I don't really believe all that blah. The question for me is, what can we promise to one another? And I think the answer is that we can promise each other hard, honest work. The work of raising caring children in an often uncaring world. The work of trying to live with honesty and integrity and joy in a world rife with lies and deception and hurt and sorrow. The work of building a beloved community where each person has dignity and worth and divinity because of who they are, not because of what they earn or what their immigration status is. While it is far-fetched to think that we are going to someday win the lottery and then all our problems will disappear, it is not far-fetched at all to believe that each one of us can have a life that means something, that is rich in love and that makes a sustaining difference. So what I'm inviting us to do is not to buy into a fantasy, but to consider investing in a vision. Perhaps there has been too much scandal around money and religious communities. Stories abound of ministers and staff who either embezzled or absconded with the church's money. Not at Cedar Lane, mind you, other places. No, just to be clear, because people sit and wonder, what did he mean by that? Did something happen? Is something going to happen? So please, don't go down that rabbit hole. Stay with me. And then there are those who equate faith with prosperity or push religious bric-a-brac and knickknacks in exchange for financial contributions that deeply offend us. We try not to do that here. And, of course, there is that other thing that ministers constantly talk about money. They do this metaphorically, they do this with allusions and alliterations and puns, and sometimes literally as well. And then, of course, church books are never audited enough. Financial and management practices are often questionable. And then there never seems to be enough money. Every time you turn around, the church has its hand out for more money. I mean, think of all those auctions, all those holiday appeals, All those special fundraisers, all those appeals, all those special fundraisers, all those holiday appeals. You get the picture. And then there are some people who, quite frankly, are not sure that their gifts of substance to the church earn enough return. As the Reverend Gary Blaine rightly put it, putting money in the offering plate is not like investing in a mutual fund where slow but certain growth is a reasonable expectation. We're often not sure what the benefits or rewards are for our contributions to the church. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands for this one. But he is right. There are a number of people who shake and shudder when they realize that over 60% of church budgets go for staff salaries. And they're not sure what it is that ministers and church staff actually do and why we need them all in the first place. And in a way, they are right. They are right to feel that way, as there are few quantifiable and objective results that are obvious to the average member. And these same people might be surprised to know that ministers and staff also wonder what good they have done lately and who really appreciates the 55-hour work week that they are giving to their congregations. And then there are a few who try to influence the decisions of the church through their pledging, by withholding their pledge because they are mad at the minister or because a beloved program has been ended that they really were attached to, or because the bathroom was painted blue without a congregational decision being made instead of being painted antique white. These are not hypotheticals. Another reason why churches are in denial about money is because we often feel or are made to feel guilty and embarrassed about the fact that by the world's standards, we are wealthy people, which we are, even though we get a little queasy when the UUA puts out notices and admonitions urging us to practice economic justice. Right? Yep, you lifted that up as one of the top things that the UUSJ is engaged in. But the fact of the matter is, we are wealthier than many countries in the world, and we do have a wealthier lifestyle in comparison. But the other fact of the matter is that the average American family is 1 or 2 paychecks away from financial insolvency. The greatest stress on most marriages and relationships is financial, especially revolving credit debt. American family incomes, adjusted for inflation, are not growing. In the 1960s, families' incomes grew about 3% annually. Since the 1980s, they have not grown at all. We're not certain what to do about the paradox of our relative wealth and precarious financial security. And quite frankly, as the Reverend Blaine points out, the church has done little to teach us about stewardship or speak honestly about the place of money in our lives. We have failed you. You see, the church's annual fund is about the church's operating budget, and it seems remote from our personal finances. We only get the message that we should give more, which seems out of touch with our financial realities. Renowned sociologist of religion Robert Wuthnow has persuasively argued that American churches are in an economic crisis. This he wrote in 1997, by the way, especially the gap between revenue and expenditures. In his book, Crisis in the Churches, Spiritual Malaise, Fiscal Woe, he writes, revenues are dropping off, especially when giving is adjusted for inflation or is considered in relation to family incomes. Just as this decrease is happening, the need for resources has never been greater. Increasing numbers of disadvantaged people are looking to their churches for help. The churches are being asked to fill the gaps left by cuts in government welfare programs. Staff salaries are squeezed, old buildings are in disrepair, new congregants are desperately needed. Sound familiar? Because this description not only reveals the struggle of Cedar Lane in Bethesda, but most of the other churches and other religious communities in our region and around the country. Now, according to Whitnow and Reverend Blaine, there are two reasons why we are in this predicament, and both reasons are related to one another. The first is that most people are struggling with their own financial needs and do not see how the church is related to them. The church has not taken seriously the stewardship of families and how they may prosper financially. The second and related issue is the failure of the church, and in this case, the liberal church, to help people connect their money with their values, their hard-earned income with their values. There is a spiritual dis-ease in our congregations because we have disconnected our financial security from our most cherished convictions. Now, I'm not suggesting that somehow I have a magic answer to these problems. What I am suggesting is that we need to initiate an intentional conversation that will lead us to a stewardship of our best Unitarian Universalist principles and practices with our financial well-being. I propose that we recognize that money matters and agree that we will talk about it more openly. It means that we plan religious education that promotes financial well-being about budgets for young adults and families that reflect their values and their dreams. It means teaching people that living means giving and how we can do that and pay for our children's education or plan for our retirement. It means taking money, that slipped right through. It means talking openly and honestly about our church's financial needs, how to manage and grow our endowment responsibly, and how we can expand the ministry of the church to meet the spiritual and emotional needs of future generations. As a modest beginning, let me state that human existence requires that we consume and that we take. We take from nature's bounty and the work of other persons. We are the recipients of the abundance of generosity of people we have never met or are even conscious of. Just this place exists because of the generosity and abundance of people who went before us. That is what we are enjoying today. But you see, we do not have to give. Taking is a necessity, but giving is a choice. I submit that it is in giving that we experience our true freedom as human beings. We can choose what we give our money to and where we choose to invest our time, talents, and our energy. It is in our giving that we create and define our lives and the values that identify us. As Khalil Gibran said, givers are believers in life and the bounty of life, and their coffer is never empty. So this is just the beginning of what I hope will be a long conversation. And my intention today is not to make you feel ashamed or guilty or embarrassed or defensive. No. But to just say, we need to be more engaged spiritually, discerning what the role of money is in our lives. And this is a good place, a good time to begin that. Because money touches our self-esteem and self-worth and our sense of security as families and as a congregation. It has tremendous influence on our sense of personal and congregational sense of accomplishment. But today, I challenge us to make an intentional choice with our money to support this religious community. So I invite you to reflect more deeply about the role of Cedar Lane in your lives, what Unitarian Universalism means to you, and the ways Cedar Lane and Unitarian Universalism has touched and transformed you, the ways that your heart is moved when you show up for worship, learning, service, the joy you experience when a child or one of our youth lives out our liberal religious values in the public by witnessing for equity and justice or to heal our broken planet. That sense of connection and belonging and well-being we feel when we gather to celebrate the life of a beloved member who has passed away, or the fulfillment we feel for the opportunity to live into our first principle of affirming the inherent worth and dignity of every person through the work of being a living sanctuary for Doña Rosa and her family. Think about it. Think about what Cedar Lane means in your life and what we need to do to ensure its diverse and vital ministry, especially in these times. Because I strongly believe that what we realistically can do here is positively frightening. Yes, it is frightening. Our possibilities are frightening in the sense that Marianne Williamson talks about when she says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And if the power we each have is frightening, this congregation should be absolutely terrified. So I invite you to consider pledging a percentage of your income enough to make a difference in your lives. Now, you know your own financial resources and circumstances and the demands on those resources. So I'm not going to tell you how much you should pledge, only that I ask you to stretch yourselves. Now, for some of us, a pledge of $100 is a stretch. And then for some of us, a pledge of $10,000 is not a stretch. But if each of us stretches ourselves, all will be nourished here. You see, our pledge income is always made up of those with the capacity to increase their giving substantially and those whose circumstances require them to cut back. And then many of us, myself included, just keep on keeping on. So could you afford to increase your pledge by 6%, as the generosity campaign is asking us to, or 10% or more? And then could we together encourage 50 additional individuals or families to make a pledge or renew a pledge this time? Because when we do that, we could then begin to live less out of scarcity and more out of sufficiency and, dare I say, abundance. So, friends, pledge as much as it takes to make you smile. Smile. And to make love real and to make love work at Cedar Lane. And I say, amen. Thank you. All right, I got through that and you're still smiling, or you're being polite, whichever way. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit to sing, Love Will Guide Us. I invite you to be seated for the closing words. A story for you in closing. It's the story of the Church of Scotland minister, himself a teetotaler, who gave his small Highland congregation a scathing, if ineffective, sermon on the evils of alcohol. The following week, he and all his congregants and neighbors were invited to a harvest feast at the manor of the area's richest farmer, Lord McGregor. Now, Lord McGregor's farm was famed not only for the prized barley and oats which it produced, but also for the fine single malt whiskey, which old McGregor himself bottled every year. At the end of that magnificent feast, each guest was served a glass of single malt. Now, not wishing to offend his host, the parson did drink his serving and found it to be quite delicious. In fact, as he took his leave that evening, he discreetly asked Lord McGregor if he might have a case of the whiskey donated to the parsonage, strictly for medicinal purposes, of course. Now, McGregor was happy to do so on one condition, that the minister himself write a public thank you for the gift on the front page of the parish newsletter. The parson thought about this for a moment and agreed. The next morning, not one but 2 cases of single malt whiskey were delivered as promised to the parsonage. And as promised, the minister wrote this public thank you in the next newsletter. It read, "The minister wishes to thank Lord McGregor for his most generous gift of fruit to the parsonage this week. But even more importantly, we thank the Lord for the fine spirit in which it was delivered and offered." I thank you too for the fine spirit in which you support this, your spiritual home. Go in peace. Go making peace, living gently, loving mightily, giving generously, and bowing to the mystery.